Hi everyone, welcome to the first ever Next.js project on Frontend Simplified. In this project, we'll be building a to-do app with Firebase. Now the point of this project is not to have a fancy project that you can show on your resume, but to understand how we can use Firebase and Next.js together and how we can build dynamic pages that are server-side rendered. So we'll be getting the data from the Firebase database and we will server-side render them so that there's no loading time and so that the page has high SEO performance. So we'll be building an app like this. I know, nothing fancy. So over here you can add any to-do, like for example, learn Next.js and the detailed do FES crash course. And now if you press add to-do, you can see it appearing instantly. Notice how there's no page refresh. And then when we click on this, we go to a different page and we see more information. And you'll notice how if we reload, we'll see that there's no loading time. And that's because all of this is being rendered on the server. So this is very powerful stuff. And it's also SEO friendly. So imagine this was an article or something. It would be very SEO friendly and Google would rank your page high in the search results. So we'll be learning a lot of new things and I'm excited. So let's get started. So guys, go to your desktop and then create a new folder. I'll be calling it Next To Do. And then open this folder in VS Code and then open up your terminal and then type the command npx create next app and a space dot to make sure that it's installed in the current folder. Once you press enter, you will see this, select no, and then for ESLint, select no. And then once you press enter, it should install all the dependencies. So once all the dependencies are installed, type the command npm run dev, and then open this link. And you should see the next 13 template. So I'm going to put them side by side now. And now let's get started on the app. So guys, now if we go to pages and then index.js, we can delete everything over here because we don't need it. So we can just delete all of this and we just return a fragment. And once we save, you should see all of that gone. And we can also delete all of these that we don't need. So we can delete that, and then we can delete the styles and all of this as well. So guys, before we connect Firebase and all that, let's create a box that will contain our to-do list. So it won't be anything fancy, it's just a box with our to-dos in it. So let's create a new folder called components. And inside it, we'll have a new file called to-do-list.js. And we'll just be exporting a function. So to-do list. And we'll be returning a fragment with a div. And inside the div, we'll have a h1 that says to-dos. And underneath that, we'll have an unordered list. And inside it, we'll have our to-dos. So we'll have a list and we'll have to-do 1. Let's just have 3 for now. So now we can input this to-do list in our index.js. So to-do list. So it was imported automatically. So now if we save, we can see our to-dos over here. But we want to center it in the middle of the page. So let's do that now. So we can wrap this to-do list in a div. And we can give this div a class name of container. Because this won't be anything fancy, we're not using CSS modules. We'll just be using the globals.css file. So inside globals.css, we can delete all of this. When we save, you can see all the styles are gone. And then we can style the container class, so .container. We'll give it a height of 100 VH. And then display flex. And then justify the content to the center. And then align item center. So once we save, our to-dos should be centered. So now let's style the to-dos because it doesn't look that good right now. So inside our to-dos list, let's give the unordered list a class name of to-do list. And then we can give the list a class name of list item. And we can style these in our globals.css file now. So the to-do list, we'll give it a height of about 300 pixels, so height. And we'll give it a width of 250 pixels. And we'll give it a border, 2 pixels, solid black. And then also let's give it some padding. So padding of 24 pixels. And now let's style the individual list. So go down here and then dot list item. Let's give it some padding of say 18 pixels. And then margin top of 10 pixels. And let's give it some border. So border 1 pixel solid black. And let's give it a border radius of 12 pixels. And you want to get rid of these bullet points. So we'll say list style none. And we want it so that these items are clickable. So when we click on them, we want to go to a different route and it shows more details about these to-dos. So we can say dot list item and then hover. And then we want the background color to be say light blue. So now when we hover over them, we get that light blue color and we want the cursor to be pointer. So you can say cursor, pointer. So that's our to-do list done. Let's now work on creating a form so that we can create to-dos. So guys, in our components, create a new file called create-todo.js. And inside it, we'll be exporting a function. So export default function, create to do. And we'll be returning a fragment with a form inside. And in it, we'll have an input of type text. And we'll also have a label called title. So now we can import the create to do in our index.js. So create to do. And if we save, you can see the component over here. But we don't want it side by side. We want it underneath this list. So in our globals.css file in the container, we can add flex direction of column. So once we save, we can see it underneath the list. Also, I'm going to zoom out a bit because it's a bit too zoomed in right now and we can't see the whole page. Also, we want this input to be underneath titles, so we can add a line break in our create to do. So we'll just have a BR over here. That makes it so that our input is underneath the title. And we also need a text area for more details of the to do. So we can just copy this and paste it over here. And we can call it detail. And we also need to add a break over here. And over here, we'll have a text area. So now we can see that there's a text area over here. And now we need to have some sort of state so that we can get the user input. And say const to do and set to do is equal to use state. And initially, it'll just be an object with a title and detail property. So title will be an empty string. Let me just auto format this. And it'll also have a detail, which will also be an empty string. So now we need to handle getting the details from the user. So let's just get rid of the terminal because we don't need it right now. So guys, the input. So on change. So we take the event and then we set the to do. So the new to do will be an object that's the same as this object, but we'll just be changing the title. So we need to use a spread operator. And then we need to change the title to be the event.target.value. So let me just auto format this. So guys, what we did over here is that we took the input, and while the input changed, so when we add something over here, we took the value. So when someone types, this changes. And what we did is that we merged it with the old object over here. So we set the to do to be an object. And then inside the object, we spread the to do object. So all the properties inside the old to do, we added it to this new object over here. And then we changed the title to the e.target.value. So that's the value that the user puts in over here. And we need to do the same thing with the text area. So we can just copy this and paste it over here. Let me just format it. And instead of title, this will be detail. And now we need to do one more thing, that is make the value of the input the to-do.title. So you can say the value is equal to to-do.title. Same thing with the text area. The value is equal to to-do.detail. So now we've handled getting the inputs from the user. And to show you what we just did, we can have a p tag over here. And inside it, we can json.stringify the to-do. So now you can see it over here. And if we type something, the title changes and also the detail changes. And we also need a button so that we can add the to-do to the to-do list. So you can have a button that says add to-do. And the reason I put it outside the form is because if it's inside the form and you press the button, then it's just going to refresh the page. And yes, you can prevent that with the e.prevent default, but I chose to do it this way. You could choose either way, it's up to you. So guys, now we need to add Firebase so that we can have a database where we can store our to-dos and where we can create, read, delete, and update them. So on VS Code, open up your terminal and then type npm install Firebase. And that will install Firebase for you. And while that's installing, open up a new tab and then go to Firebase. Click on the first link. and then hit go to console, or if you're not signed in, you need to sign in, and then go to console, and then press create a project. And you need to put in a name. I'll be calling it next to do, and then accept these, and then press continue. We don't need Google Analytics and update them. So on VS Code, open up your terminal and then type npm install Firebase, and that will install Firebase for you. And while that's installing, open up a new tab and then go to Firebase, click on the first link, and then hit go to console, or if you're not signed in, you need to sign in, and then go to console, and then press create a project. And you need to put in a name. I'll be calling it next to do, and then accept these, and then press continue. We don't need Google Analytics for this project, so disable it, and then create project. So this will take a while to load, and I'll see you once it's done. So guys, once it's done, press continue, and then you should be inside your project over here. And then click on this web icon over here. Once you're there, you need to give it a nickname. I'm just going to call it next to do, and then register app. We already did this step, so we don't need to do it anymore. And now we have our credentials. So copy this, and in your next app, create a new file called firebase.js, and then paste the credentials in. And guys, it's important that you don't put this in this file over here, because if you upload it to GitHub or something, people can see these keys, and you must keep these keys a secret. So guys, because we don't want to expose our API keys, what we have to do is we have to create another file, and we have to call it .env.local. So when you have a file like this, .env.local, GitHub ignores these files. So you don't send them to your GitHub repo and accidentally expose your API keys. And the contents of this file will live locally. So this way you won't expose sensitive information to the client. So make sure you always do this and you don't expose your API keys. So guys, we need to put these keys in our .env.local file. So let me just copy these and then paste it over here. So guys, this is how we declare environment variables in Next.js. You need to say next underscore public underscore and then the name of the variable. So for the first one, it will be API underscore key. So API underscore key. And then you have an equals, and then you need to have the key. And the key doesn't need to be in quotation marks. You can just paste it like this. So that's how you use environment variables in Next.js. You need to make sure you have the next underscore public prefix. And now we need to do the same thing for the rest of the variables. So guys, once you've done that, you can delete this. And now we need to access these variables inside our firebase.js. So this is how you do that, guys. So for the value of this property, it's not going to be the string, but you need to access the variable from this file over here. So this is how we do that. So we need to say process.env dot and then the name of the variable, which is next underscore public underscore API underscore key. So that's how we access the environment variables in our JavaScript file. And now we need to do the same thing for the rest of the variables. So guys, once you have the rest of the variables done, you can save, and then you need to restart your server. So open up your terminal and then press Ctrl+C to kill your server, and then type npm run dev again to restart the server. So once you restart it, you should see loaded env from this path. So that means our environment variables are loaded and we can use it in our app. So that's how you use public facing environment variables in Next.js. And now let's move on to making our database. So guys, now we need to create our Firestore database. So go to Firebase and then open the sidebar, and then go to build and then go to Firestore database. And then over here, we need to create a database. So click on create database, and we'll be starting in test mode. And then find your location over here and then click enable. And we wait until our Firestore is created. So guys, it says cannot enable Firestore for this project. So for me, an unknown error has occurred. But if I refresh, I'm pretty sure it should be fixed. So yes, once I refreshed, my Firestore database has been created. And so if you're getting the error, just refresh your page and then it should be fixed. So once this is created, what you have to do is go to the rules section. So once you're in the rules section, you need to change this allow read write if false to true. So this way we can read and write to the database. By default, it was false because Firebase wants our database to be as secure as possible. We don't just want anyone to be able to read and write to our database. But since we're doing this to learn, we don't need to worry about security right now. We just need to know how the database works and how we can use it. So we'll worry about security later on. So change this to true and then click on publish. and then wait for it to publish. So once that's done, we can now use our database. So guys, in the data section of the CRUD Firestore, click on Start Collection, and we'll create a to-dos collection. So call this to-dos, and inside the to-dos we'll have a document. So to-dos is the collection, and then inside to-dos you have a bunch of documents which are each individual to-do. So we can auto-generate the ID, and we need some key value pairs. So we'll have a title, and let the value be learn next.js. And then let's create a new field, and that will be the detail. And over here we can say do front-end simplified crash course. So now if we save, wait for this to load, you can see we created a to-dos collection, and inside this collection we have a document that has the title and the detail. So now we need to implement some sort of method so that we can go to a create to-do.js, and then we can send the data from the to-do to this Firebase Firestore. Also guys, one thing I didn't mention is that once you create your .env.local file and you have your environment variables inside it, you need to restart your server. So we can end this server and then restart it. So we can just refresh this, and over here you can see loaded env from that path. So now we can close our terminal and we can go to the create to-do.js and then close all the other tabs. So guys, right now what we have to do is we have to access this database, this Firestore database. And the way we do that is that we go to our firebase.js file, and then we import a function, and that function is called getFirestore. So come over here and then type import getFirestore from firebase/firestore. So guys, this function accepts the app. So we can say const our database. So db is equal to getFirestore, and we put our app inside this getFirestore function. So we put app over here, and now we have access to our Firestore database because of this function over here. And now we need to export this database so that we can use it in other files. So export db, you need to surround it with the curly braces. So once you press save, you can now use this in other files. So guys, to create data to the Firestore database, we need to import three things. The first thing is the database. So import db from /Firebase. And we also need to import two functions from Firebase. And they're called addDoc and collection. So import addDoc, so from Firebase/Firestore. And we also need to import collection. Alright, so now we need to create a function that can send our to-do to the Firestore database. So it'll be an async function called handleSubmit. And so guys, to send data to Firebase, it's pretty simple. You just need one line. So you need a reference to the document. So you can say const docref is equal to await. We need to await it because it's an asynchronous function. And we need to add that document to our collection, right? So we say add doc, that's this function we imported from here. And this add doc takes in two arguments. The first one is where you want to add the doc. So you want to add it to the to-dos collection, right? So that's where we need to use this collection function. So we say collection, and this is also a function, and the first thing you pass in here is which database you want. So you want our database, which is db. And in the second argument, you put in what collection you want the doc to be added. So you want it to be added in the to-dos collection. And so the second argument for the add doc is what you want to be added. So that's an object. So you can have an object here, and you put all the things that you want to be added in the doc, like the title and the detail. But we already have our object, which is this to-do over here. That's already an object. So all we have to do is say to-do over here. And that's all you have to do to send data to the Firestore database. So in our button over here, we can say on click, we handleSubmit. So now we can save, and now let's look at our app. So guys, now if we go to a to-do app and we type something like learn DSA and invert a binary tree. Now if you press add to do, we should see this in our Firestore database. So we should see it over here. So let's try it out. So I'm going to press add to do. And now if I take a look at the Firestore database, I can see that there's another document here. So if I click on that, you can see we see that there's invert a binary tree and learn DSA. So it's working. So that's all you have to do to write data to the Firestore database. You just need this one line and these two functions. So guys, now we can write to the database as much as we want. So we can make this, do the dishes, and the detail can be anything. I'm just gonna say hello. But there's one problem with this, and that is that when you press add to do, the inputs still stay there. We want the inputs to disappear. And that's very simple to do. All you have to do is in the handle submit function, after we add the doc, we need to set the to do to be an empty string again. So we just do set to do, and then we just make it this empty object. So that's all you have to do, guys. So now if we save and we have a different to do, and you press add to do, once it adds the doc, the inputs disappear. So that's a very simple fix for this problem, and we can write to a database with no problems here. So now we've solved the create to do problem. Now we need to find a way to get all these documents. So we need to get all these to dos and display it in our list over here. So let's do that right now. So guys, to display the to dos, we need to go to our to do list.js, and over here we need to import two Firebase functions. So guys, to get all the documents from a collection, we only need two functions from Firebase. And those two functions are onSnapshot and collection. So these are the two functions you need to get all the documents from a collection. So guys, what we'll do is that we'll get all these to-dos and we'll put them in an array, and then we'll map over them in our list. So let's do that now. So the first thing we need is some sort of state where we can have our array so that we can map over it. So we can say const to-dos and set to-dos is equal to use state, and it will initially be an empty array. And now we need to have a use effect where we can get all the to-dos. So let's have our use effect, and guys, over here is where we use our onSnapshot function. So guys, this onSnapshot function basically takes a picture of our collection. So it takes like a snapshot and gets all the documents from that collection and then gives it to us. And this onSnapshot function is also a listener. So every time there's a change in the collection, this function will run again. So essentially, if we add a to-do, we're going to see that instantly. We don't need to refresh our page or anything. So this is how we use the function. We say const unsubscribe. And we're calling it unsubscribe because of a very good reason. I'll tell you after we finish this function. So we say onSnapshot, so we call the onSnapshot function. And in this function, in the first argument, we pass in the reference to the collection that we want all the documents from. So we want it from the to-dos collection, right? So we need to use the collection function. And over here, we need to pass in the database. So we need to import that. So database. And then the second argument is the to-dos collection. So we're going to say to-dos. So guys, after we pass these in, we get an object back. And that object is a snapshot of our collection. And guys, the second argument is a callback function. And in this function, we receive an object, and that object is a snapshot of our collection. So I'm just going to call it snapshot, but you can call it anything. So guys, in this function, we handle whatever we want to do with the snapshot object that we receive. So let's just console.log the snapshot to see what it is. So now if we go to our to-do app and we inspect and we go to our console, you can see an object being logged. So if you open it up, you can see that there's a lot of data inside. But the thing we're interested in is this docs property. So this docs property is an array with all the documents in our collection. So we're going to map through this docs property, and we're going to put them in our to-dos array in the use state. So let's do that now. So we can say set to-dos. So this is the snapshot object, and in that object, we're getting the docs property. So snapshot.docs. And this is an array, so we can map it, .map, and then we're going to take each doc, and we'll return an object, which will have a title property, which will be the to-dos title. So guys, this doc is each individual document in our collection, and this doc has a method called data. So when we say doc.data, this will give us the data inside our doc, which is a title and a detail. And then we can just access the title from this data. So doc.data.title. And we have to do the same thing with the detail. So the detail is doc.data.detail. So guys, to make this data part even more clear, if you look at the documents in this array, you can see that there's no data inside. It just has some random stuff. But to actually get the data, we need to call this data function on this document. Then we can get the data. So to show this, if we come here and we say console.log doc.data, and then we press save, you can see we're getting all the details in all the docs. So to get the details inside the docs, you need to call the data method. So now we can get rid of this and we can clear our console. And guys, as you can see, this method is being called so many times. And that's because we don't have a dependency array in our use effect. So make sure you don't forget that. So now if we save, you can see it's no longer being called. That's because we didn't have the dependency array. So now if we clear our console, it should not be calling the function multiple times. So guys, now our to-dos array is an array full of objects of our to-dos. So now we can just map over it and display it in our to-dos list. So let's do that now. So we'll say to-dos dot map, and we'll take each to-do and we'll return a list, and inside the list we'll have the to-do.title. So now as you can see, we're getting all our to-dos, but it's flowing outside of the container. So we need to fix that in our CSS. So in our globals.css file, in our to-do list, let's just make overflow y scroll. And now we can just scroll through our to-dos. And guys, there's just one more problem over here. And if we inspect, we can see that problem. So if we go to our console, you can see it says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So we need a key for our list. And guys, the best thing for a key is probably the ID. So guys, let's get the ID in our to-do object in the use effect. So over here, we're just going to have an ID property, and that will just be doc.id. This ID is this IDs you're seeing over here, the auto-generated ones. You don't need to call the data method to get the ID. It's available automatically. So now over here, we can come and we can say the key is the to-do.id. So now if we save, that warning should go away. So if you clear our console, we're not getting that warning anymore, and our to-do app works just fine. So guys, now we can add any to-do and it'll appear in our to-dos list. But before we do that, we just need to do one more thing, and that is in the use effect over here, we need to return unsubscribe. That's this function over here. And why are we doing that? And that's because this onSnap function, it's a listener. So it's listening to our collection over here. It's listening to this to-dos collection, and it's listening for any change in the collection. So anytime you add or delete a document, it reruns this function so we get the new data, right? So that's why this is a listener and it's always listening. But if it's always listening, it's taking quite a bit of resources, right? Because you need resources to be able to run these functions all the time. So that's why we return unsubscribe. So when we return this, we stop the listener. So we're unsubscribing from this listener so that it's not always taking up resources from your computer. So this way our website is more performant. So that's why we're returning unsubscribe, so that we stop listening to the document and so that we're not taking away extra resources from the computer that we don't need. So now if we save and we add any to-do, it could be anything, and you can see it appearing over here, and there's no refreshing whatsoever. So let's test it one more time. So we have something like learn HTML, and we say do FES course, and we press add to-do. It's right there, no refreshing, it's quite fast and it's instant. So right now we've built a pretty good app, but we can add a bit more functionality. So we want to be able to click on these to-dos. So when we click on them, we go to a different URL and it shows more information about that to-do. So let's do that now. So guys, to do that is very simple. All we have to do is wrap our list in a link component. So we'll import link from next/link, and we'll wrap our list around that link. And we need to put the return outside. And we need to put this key in our link component. And the href for this link component will be the ID of the to-do. So it'll be a slash plus the to-do.id. We're getting an error because we need to get rid of the semicolon. So once we save, our app should be working, and you see it's underlined as blue. That's because we have the link here. We can fix that later, that's not a problem. But now we can click on these. But that's because we don't have files for those routes yet, but we'll make that dynamically. But what's important is that you can see that we're getting routed by the ID. So this is the ID of the to-do. This is from these IDs over here. So every time we click on a to-do, we get routed to slash the ID of that to-do. So this way we can get the data of the to-do with this ID. So guys, now what we have to do is we have to create a dynamic route for these to-dos. So that's pretty simple to do. And next, in the pages folder, you need to create a new folder and we'll call it ID. And this needs to be surrounded by square brackets and end with .js. And now this route is now dynamic. So over here, we need to export a function. So export default function. I'm going to call it to-do. And we'll return a div. And there'll be a h1 with the to-do title. So to-do title. And there will be a h3 with the detail. So now if we save, we can see that we're no longer getting a 404 page. And so now we can go to any of these to-dos and we won't get any 404 pages. So now that we made the dynamic page, we need to get the data from the to-do. And we want to get that data on the server, not on the client. So this way we get the data before it's sent to the client, and this way we have good SEO performance. So guys, to get the data on the server, we need to use the get server side props function. So we need to export an async function called get server side props. And so anything we write inside this function will be run on the server, not on the client. And in this function, we can automatically accept an argument. We can call that context. And this context argument has important information such as the ID over here. So now if we console.log the context and we open up our console, we won't see it over here. And that's because the console in the browser is in the client, and this only runs in the server. So we need to open up our terminal to see the console.logs in the server. But even if we open up a terminal, we'll get an error like this, and that's because we're not returning anything. We need to return an object in this function, and the object must have a props property. So we can return an object with props inside, and let that just be an empty object for now. So now if we save, and then we open up our terminal, you can see the context being logged. And in this context, there's this query object, and in it we have the ID. This ID is coming from over here, and that has the query that we wanted, which is this over here. So with this, we can get the to-do doc from the Firestore database, and then we can render the information in the server. So we can say const ID is equal to context.query.id. So now if we console.log the ID should be logged. And we can get rid of this console.log. We need to refresh this page, and you can see the ID being logged. So now we can use this to get the document from Firebase. So now we can close our terminal and we can close this console, and now let's get the data from Firebase. So guys, before we start, I'm just going to delete this so we can see everything from the beginning. So now we have this ID, which we're getting from this context, which is just this ID over here. And now we need to get that document by ID. So to do this, you need two functions from Firebase. You need to import the getDoc function, so getDoc, and you need to import the doc function. So getDoc and doc, that's all you need to get a single document from a collection in Firebase. And we also need to import the DB, so import DB. So guys, we can get a single document with just one line. So we can say const doc snap, so that's a snapshot of the document. Over here, we need to call the getDoc function, so getDoc. And then we need to pass in the reference to the document, and we need to use the doc function for that. So over here, we pass in the doc function, and then this doc function is just like the collection function, but for a document. So the first argument is the DB, and then the collection, which is to-dos. And finally, we need to pass in the ID of the doc, which is just this ID over here. So ID, and that's all you have to do to get a single document from a collection. But don't forget to await this because it's an asynchronous function. So now we have the doc snap. We need to call the .data function on it. So you can say const data is equal to doc snap .data. So now we have the data of the document. We have the title and the detail. So now we need to pass this to our component. So we need to return an object with props inside. So now we can return an object, and inside that object we have a props property. And over here we can have a to-do, which is also an object, and it'll have a title property and a detail property. So the title will be data.title. So we're getting that from here, and the detail will be data.detail. So guys, now we can get our props object in this component. So now we can destructure the props to get the to-do. So to-do, and now we can use it over here. So to-do title is to-do.title, and the detail is to-do.detail. So now if we say we're getting an error, I think we just need to refresh. So guys, you just need to refresh if you get an error, and then you should get the to-do, no problems. And also, I just want to center this real quick so we can see it better. So over here, I'm just going to put the class name container. That's the container in our globals.css file. So this will center our to-do. So guys, as you can see, we got the data from the doc with no problems, and this is all rendered on the server. So this is extremely powerful stuff. So it's very SEO performant, so it's pretty powerful stuff. So guys, if we refresh, you can see that there's no loading over here. We get the to-do instantly. That's because it's rendered on the server. Whereas if we just go to the to-do list, so we just get rid of this, and now if we refresh, you can see it takes a while for the to-dos to appear, and that's because we're getting the data on the client. It takes a little bit time for it to come, whereas if we just click on any of these, we get the data instantly. That's because it's server-side rendered. So guys, all of this stuff is generated on the server, so it has good SEO performance, and when you refresh, there's no loading state. So this is pretty powerful stuff. So guys, that's all for today. You learned how to get real-time updates with the Firestore database. You learned how to server-side render pages. So there's a lot of stuff we've learned today, and we'll need all of that when we build complex projects like the Discord clone and the Twitter clone and the Medium clone. So I'm excited for those, and thank you for watching, and that's all for today.
you.